With power outages now a daily reality in Cuba, the island is facing a deepening crisis impacting everything from food and water supplies to the very survival of its people. Today, we'll dive into what these blackouts mean for Cubans like Maria and Dariel, and examine the wider implications for the country's future. For over a week, Cubans have endured life-threatening blackouts across the island, leaving many without basic necessities. This crisis isn't just about flickering lights, it's about food that spoils in the relentless Caribbean heat, water supplies drying up, and the overall strain on a system already pushed to its limits. Stories of resilience like that of 76-year-old Maria Elena Cardenas offer a window into how Cubans are coping, but also reveal the cracks in a nation struggling to keep afloat. Cuba's power grid has been in shambles for years, but these blackouts are more than a technical glitch. They represent a severe energy shortage that has spiraled beyond control, affecting all aspects of daily life. Let's walk through how this all started, what's happening now, and what lies ahead for the people of Cuba. Life in darkness. On October 17th, the government ordered all non-essential workers to return home to conserve energy, but within hours, the island was plunged into darkness as one of the main power stations, Antonio Guterres, shut down, leading to a chain reaction of failures across other power stations. At the heart of this crisis is Maria Elena, who lives in a shelter in Havana's old colonial district after her home collapsed. Her only source of fuel for cooking is a few sticks she gathered on the street. Like many Cubans, she shrugs it off with characteristic resilience, saying, "We Cubans manage the best we can." But her story reflects the harsh reality faced by hundreds of thousands across the island, struggling to live without a consistent power supply, and as temperatures soar, the lack of fans or air conditioning has made restful sleep nearly impossible. A crumbling system. The government blames the 62-year-old U.S. trade embargo for making it difficult to import the fuel and parts necessary to keep the energy grid functioning. And they're not entirely wrong. Cuba's once reliable allies, Russia and Venezuela, have both slashed their support, leaving the island with little to keep its creaky power grid running. According to an engineer who worked at Antonio Guterres, maintenance schedules for these old power plants have been neglected. The truth is that the system was built rotten, he confessed, describing how safety equipment often failed, and how patch it up and keep it running became the only option for engineers. There's been talk of solar farms and renewable energy, but financing is scarce. A recent deal with China involves building solar farms in exchange for access to Cuba's nickel deposits. However, the brain drain, over 10% of the population has emigrated in the past 2 years, leaves questions about whether there's enough expertise left on the island to make it happen. The consequences go far beyond the lack of lights. Food storage is almost impossible without power, and refrigeration units, if they're working at all, struggle to keep food fresh. Those who saved food before the blackout found themselves having to give it away as it began to spoil. Dariel Ramirez, a resident of Havana, shared what little food he had with his neighbors to prevent it from going to waste. And it's not just food. Water access has also taken a hit. The obsolete water supply system can't operate without the electrical pumps that bring water to homes. Over 600,000 people were already without consistent access to water, and now that number has increased as more pumps break down. Most of Havana is experiencing severe water shortages, with residents hauling buckets from communal taps whenever they can find water. The strain on daily life is wearing on the Cuban people. Unlike previous power outages which saw protests in the streets, this crisis has left people too exhausted to demonstrate. There's the occasional sound of pots and pans being banged in protest, but many are simply trying to survive. A few have expressed their frustration through humor. When asked how he was preparing for the next blackout, Dariel gestured to the Museum of the Revolution, where the famous Grandma yacht, the boat that Fidel and Raul Castro used to return to Cuba, is on display. "If this happens again, we need to prepare the Grandma," he said, "so we can all sail away." But it's not all jokes. For some, these constant blackouts have spurred fears about the future. Julio Cesar Rodriguez, a resident of Havana, summed up the sentiment. "Cubans are usually cheerful, even in tough times. But this is really bad. This despair is compounded by the knowledge that government support is limited, and many feel they have nowhere to turn." Cuba's government has warned that anyone protesting will face consequences, and ministers have made it clear that they will crack down on indecent behavior. The atmosphere of repression has only intensified in recent months, with journalists and dissidents facing harassment and even imprisonment. Just recently, Amnesty International labeled several Cuban detainees as prisoners of conscience, highlighting the ongoing crackdown. The U.S. response has been cautious. President Joe Biden has maintained a firm stance against the Cuban government, though some, like U.S. academic William Leo Grande, argue that pushing Cuba too far could create a humanitarian crisis that would spill over to U.S. shores. Leo Grande warned, "A collapse of the regime would be a humanitarian disaster, spurring an emigration tsunami far larger than what we have seen so far." These blackouts are more than an inconvenience. They're a symptom of a system teetering on the edge. They've left residents like Maria Elena, Dariel, and Julio to fend for themselves as they face a breakdown in nearly every aspect of daily life. From food shortages to water scarcity, and with little relief in sight, the Cuban people's endurance is being tested like never before. If these blackouts continue, they could deepen the humanitarian crisis already brewing on the island. The future of Cuba hangs in the balance, and only time will tell if the government can stabilize the grid or if external aid might come to their rescue. Thank you for watching. If this story resonates with you, please like this video and consider subscribing to stay updated on important global events. And let us know in the comments, what do you think lies ahead for Cuba?